Welcome.
Hello, welcome to the Stream of Truth. I am Dr. Tassel Faith Shamebrook,
And I'm Sean Kelly.
and today we are discussing being our God self.
Yeah, and I think correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we're focusing primarily on how we do this with relationships. Um
Yes.
Not just romantic ones or partnerships, but any relationship. And you can use these concepts as well in anything. Um I think a lot of us have a knowing that like our goal is to do this, like is to try to approach all situations with love, right? In order, and
Yes.
that's the simplest way to describe what the God self is, I think.
Totally. I'm so glad you said that. That summarizes the whole stream. We don't have to say anything
All right, so we're
more.
done. We're done. Thank you so much.
What
um,
exactly did you just say? Approach everything with love? Is that what you said?
yeah, approach everything with love. So,
That's it.
and
Yeah.
trust and love.
Yes.
Um, ba- yeah, basically like um, the way that I kind of see it like that is we eventually sort of notice that like a lot of the reason we're not happy with something is because we're like judging things and we're creating our own discontent, and it becomes kind of clear that we need to stop doing that. And the way that we stop doing that is by seeing everything with love. And so our inclinations stop being to change people or to change ourselves to suit others or to change anything. We essentially sit in a knowing of ourselves and remembering of our divinity, and then we will just everything that we see, we accept, we trust it, and we love it. Now, trusting it, I don't mean that just because everything that everyone says, you trust their word, and I'm not suggesting that. What I'm suggesting is that we trust that the thing that has arisen in my experience is a thing that is facilitating my learning. That's where the trust is. It's not that the thing itself uh, has some type of inherent um, need to be trusted itself or anything like that. So, um, yeah.
Yes, a screaming yes to everything you have shared. And I feel perhaps you do too. I feel I'm so deeply in this initiation right now, like really being invited to embrace what we're talking about. And I'll just say that for my human, it's not easy. And it kind of goes against some of the ways I've been taught to think in our society. And one of the biggest pieces here for me about what we're talking about is surrendering all outcomes. To me, I can approach things from a place of love, especially when I'm not attached to any of the outcomes. I'm just showing up in love, and I'm showing up to serve the highest and best. And whatever unfolds, I have peace with when I'm in my God self. My human self may feel differently. But that's like a big practice for me to show up in love, is to just let go of anything that might actually happen.
Yeah. I just wanted to say good morning, Jamie. Good morning, Angelic Sunflame. Thank you guys for joining. Um, I think that's important. One of the easiest ways to tell, like distinguish our God self versus our human self is that our God self knows it's perfect.
Yes.
It does not waver or bend from its truth, knowing that all is perfect and everything is love. So it never is not content with what's being experienced. It's never everything that is experienced is considered appropriate and is loved. So, I think most of us can look at that and go, well, I'm definitely not in my God self nearly as much as I think I probably should be. This includes our thoughts, right? Like when we have unloving thoughts towards ourselves, or when even things like, oh, I feel inspired, divinely inspired to change my job. No, I don't think so. I don't think that's necessarily a divine inspiration. It could be. It could be. But I think some reflection on it, whenever we're like inspired to change stuff, I think it's important we take a minute and consider what our motivations are. And if the motivations are to do anything other than serve, it's not a divine inspiration, I would say. Most likely. Everyone can assess on their own, of course. And I'm not trying to suggest that because people have changed jobs or done something like this, that it's wrong. I'm just trying to suggest that we notice sort of the difference between our ego trying to find comfort in adjusting the world, and our God self knowing that the beauty and love is here now and no change is required. So
Yes,
yeah,
you made a great delineation around this in a stream last week or the week before, where you were talking about inspiration versus resistance. So if you're having some type of nudge to do something or change something, when you tune in, is it coming from a place of inspiration? I feel this in my heart. I'm excited about it. This feels really aligned. Or is it coming from a place of resistance to what is? And
yeah,
I think when you brought this up, I brought up a quick example of when I was stuck in the Atlanta airport trying to get back to Nashville. And part of me really wanted to just jump in a rental car and take action and just drive home. And when I really tuned in there, I realized it wasn't really inspired to do that. I wasn't, oh, that sounds so great to do. Didn't feel so aligned. I was in resistance to having to sit and wait and be patient and feel the feelings of kind of being stuck.
yeah,
So I really like you brought that up, that we can ask ourselves, is this coming from a place of inspiration or resistance? And what I also want to share is this practice of being in our God self. And as you said, knowing that all is well. Not necessarily that things that we don't maybe need to shift things with people or our circumstances, but all in all, the experience that we are having is all is well, and we are growing and expanding from that experience. And then I've just been thinking about this so much recently. When we're in our God self, we just have complete inner peace. And this is sort of an obvious statement to make about what we're saying, but to me it's so profound, because most of my life I've had these very human goals. Like I wanted to get married and have kids. I wanted to get my PhD. I wanted to make a certain amount of money, all these different things. I wanted to meet my life partner after my divorce, all these external achievements or milestones. And this has just been very recent for me. I have realized, you know what? I'm scrapping all of that. Not scrapping it, but if any of that happens, great, icing on the cake, these sorts of things. What I really want is peace. What I really want is contentment inside of myself and joy inside of myself, no matter what is going on in my external world. And this shift and I'm still embodying it, this shift has been the greatest gift of my life, because it's freedom. It is freedom. It is freedom from the external world. I can have my own joy, peace, contentment inside of me at all times.
yeah. And I'm going to bring up a little bit of a polarizing topic here. Hopefully, I'll do it in a way that doesn't come across as offensive. Uh,
Quite a
but
disclaimer.
the topic what I'm going to talk about is the Holocaust. So
Ah, okay. Wow. That's,
Um,
yeah,
you know,
controversial.
yeah. So I don't mean to hurt anyone's feelings. If I do, I am already apologizing. Please forgive me. I We can use the example of the Holocaust to notice the divine perfection in our expression here as humanity. Um, it was many other genocides occurred, and actually, I think there was one other one that was um, more deaths than this one. But my what I'm trying to say is, it was the Holocaust that really opened the eyes of the world to this superiority idea of race, and started to really bring racial things up. Um, so it all of these things that occurred inspired humanity to really look at itself. So you can look at it at that way, but then also when the beings, and the reason I'm bringing this up is because you mentioned freedom from the external. There were I don't remember how many, but there was several Holocaust survivors that became enlightened in the prisons. They were in the they were in there with their other prisoners, and at the what were they called, concentration camps, and they became enlightened and therefore became free. Um, and so it's even in that dire of a situation, um, in the external, like it's very objectively, in our physical world, we could say that is a really hard place to be, right? But if essentially what they did was they stepped into their God self, and they remembered that they are free, and that it doesn't matter what is happening around them. They're free as they are, and they were able to let go of it. And so we can use these like super extreme examples to realize, okay, well, yeah, I mean, I had a flat tire and I was pretty pissed off about that. Um, you know, if I can wrap my head around divine perfection with the Holocaust, which is challenging, and I'm not saying that everyone has to do that. I'm just this is a way that I like to highlight the I guess the spectrum of challenge, and how humans we tend to view almost all challenge as the same in many ways. Like if our ego responds really hard, it's horrible. It's the worst. It could be the smallest little thing, but it's the worst thing ever. And I'm trying to help draw a sort of sense of um, uh, if like I said, if you can understand divine perfection through situations such like the Holocaust, where groups of beings co-created an event to um, to to highlight the insanity of the collective mind, um, then we can go, oh, okay, well, if that was perfect, then I mean, what am I complaining about, right? So I like to try to use our rationality and like logic and comparison to try to help notice some of the wisdom that it's our ego can be much like a tantrum throwing child. And I think I gave my son the wrong type of cookie the other day, and he cried, I think, for like way too long, so long. Um, and I think it was a peanut butter cookie, and he wanted chocolate chip or something. I don't remember now, but the ego is much like that. Like it's so
It can get very I'll call it
yeah,
brain locked
yeah,
on a particular outcome. And I would just say most of our socialization is just so different from what we're talking about. We're just taught to kind of decide what we want in our life and go after it. And there are very specific narratives that plot lines that were offered, you know, a lot about getting married, having kids, making money, traveling, having a certain type of body, these as the metrics of success. And when we fall short, when things don't turn out as we might have wanted, then there can just be so much shame and a sense of failure, et cetera. And the ego is really suffering. So what we're talking about is accepting what is.
Yeah.
And finding gratitude for what is, and finding gratitude for the gifts that are there that may not measure up to this socialized view of success.
Yeah. And I guess I just was trying to highlight if Holocaust prisoners could find freedom and enlightenment through what we're saying, in their experience in that situation, then certainly, if you have the freedom and capacity to sit and watch this video, you are in a life already that is already designed around your comfort. And, you know, I'm sure you have troubles and things come up. I'm not trying to minimize those, but I am trying to directly say that they don't have to be participated in that the way that you've been doing up until now. And you are constantly remaking yourself anew, and you can be free from all of that pressure and demand that both comes from the external, and then also the acceptance of the demands from the external, which form your own internal demands of yourself. Yeah.
Yes. And Abraham Hicks, who I just love and have followed for many, many years, when they would talk about manifesting, they would always say, get in touch with the foundational feeling of what you're after. What actually do you want to feel through what you're trying to manifest? And for me, at least, when I really think about what feeling do I want to have through anything that I'm working to bring through in my life, I want to feel freedom. I want to feel joy. I want to feel acceptance of my life. And so what I'm learning is I can just start with that inside of me. I can feel the freedom, feel acceptance, feel contentment inside of me first, no matter what is happening.
Mm-hmm.
And then what I'm also learning is when I'm really focused and I'm prioritizing on my inner feelings, then whatever's happening external to me, I can ask, is what's happening or what I'm choosing to participate in, is it in the direction of my own inner peace and contentment? Or is this really kind of maybe taking me off my path of inner peace and contentment? And this can be really great in relationships. Is the way I'm interacting with this person, is it contributing to my inner peace and contentment, or is it not? And then that can help possibly guide you in possibly shifting relationships and even releasing relationships, or any aspect of your life, not just relationships. So it kind of just becomes this North Star, this compass, this guiding light.
Yeah.
I am privileging and honoring above all my own inner peace and contentment. And what's showing up in me, what is showing up in my external world, is that in the direction of my inner peace and contentment or not?
Yeah. And, you know, one of the things that I like to try to recommend to people, when they're in conversations, this is best done, you know, you could do it. I recommend trying to do this literally all the time. Just internally, you don't have to say anything, but internally what you want to do is essentially namaste, right? You want to see the divinity in the other and remember the divinity in yourself while participating in all conversations. That's really what you want to do. So you want to try to create a baseline of remembering this on your own, in your own inner world, right? But then when you start to talk to people, you're going to see reflections of yourself that you may not have seen. And these reflections may be uncomfortable for the ego, or the part of the self that judges, right? Um, and so, in order to resolve some of that, we have to try to remember um, that basically we are divine, they're divine. And even if they're saying horrible things that hurt, it's not the divine saying this, right? It's not true. These things are not true, basically. Um, and although their experience of their pain that they're in is real, um, the pain has caused confusion, and in the confusion, when people are deep in confusion, they lash out in different ways. Um, and so in our relationships, we have to literally just give people a pass. Um, in some ways, when it comes to us not really liking what they said, or us not really, agreeing with them, or whatever it is. We have, if we're truly stepping into our God self in those moments, we're just going to say, they are as they are. They're perfect as they are. I love them. And there's nothing else to say about it. The divine isn't going to need to change. Now, if you're in a position where you're teaching people, then it's different, right? If you're in a position where people are requesting guidance from you in some way, or they're asking for help, even like a friend's asking for some help, um, to truly help them usually is to listen, to show them love, to let them know that they're perfect, and that you're sure they can move forward through this, that type of thing. Um, but usually advice is a little bit it's hard to make advice pure, I find. And a lot of people will have some trouble with advice. So when they're upset, especially, it's not really usually the right time to talk about those things. And so yeah, there's a tassel often says blanket of grace. Basically, like, you don't typically get angry at a baby that's crying, right? That's more or less what's happening when someone's confused and they're saying things that are way off. They're just so hurt by their own feelings, um, that they're starting to speak nonsense, basically. Um,
Yes.
and
And
just recognize that for what it is and go, this is all nonsense. Okay. And we don't have to, like, most likely they'll come back and they'll be like, I'm sorry that I said these things, or I just was so upset, I couldn't see properly, especially if they're on this journey that we're talking about with remembering ourselves and enlightenment. um they're gonna realize, it may take them a little bit of time, but they're gonna look back and go, I was I was not acting in my God self. And it's okay that I wasn't. That's the other thing, is we have to do this a lot for us to learn how to calibrate and tune ourselves to be in that frequency more regularly. So it's part, these entire things are literally designed so that we hold it, and we learn how to hold it.
yes, yes. I love the phrase that we tend to shift when the pain of not shifting becomes greater than the pain of shifting. So it's always kind of not so easy to look at ourselves or shift. But when the pain of not shifting becomes so great, we tend to take action. So I think what often happens, I know for me, is that we'll go through different experiences, perhaps not in our God self, and we'll feel into that and we'll feel that doesn't feel great. That doesn't feel aligned. This is not really my preference to continue to be like this. So I'm going to look at myself and I'm going to see, what can I shift? when I get triggered, how can I act differently so that I can remain in my God self, which feels so great? And you were basically saying this. I feel the greatest gift we can give to others when they are struggling and perhaps out of their God self is for us to remain in our God self and just give them love and space during that time, and not, and as you said, a blanket of grace.
Yeah.
And as you said, just understand they are disconnected right now from their God self. They are in fear, they are in pain, and just to have empathy for what they're
Yeah,
going
you
through.
could see it almost the same as them. They're on the ground with a broken leg and they're crying about it, right? They're
They're
in pain.
injured.
Yeah.
Yes, it's like having a broken leg. Um, and you made this point about advice. Yeah, I almost see advice as like a dirty word.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
So I have a PhD in therapy, and so I'm sort of very familiar with the practices of modernist therapy, which sometimes can be around advice. And where I lean in when I am in a session with a client is just if it's the right time for them to tune into their own inner wisdom, or whatever you want to call it, your guidance, your connection to source, your inner wisdom. But that's where I always go. It's not my place to tell them what to do. I am not them. I'm not on their soul's path. They are the only ones who can really decide what is right. So I love that phrase, inner wisdom.
Yeah.
And I wanted to just share that the reason this topic came up for me is that you and I had a very difficult interaction here in Nashville last week, right before you left. And I don't think we were completely communicating in our God selves. And so after that difficult experience, I got some downloads from spirit around all of this. And one of the ideas here that I think could be helpful for you and me, and perhaps to others, and something I'd like to add to our Namaste method, which is basically a collection of tools to help people communicate while being in their God self, is honoring, is working to maintain, be embodying our God self at all times, including in tricky conversations. And there will always be, well, I don't like using the word always, but most likely there will be tricky topics between in any relationship, whether it's with you and your kid, whether it's with you and your husband or wife, whether it's with you and your business partner. There will most likely be topics that are a little tricky, where people have different orientations, where there's some invitation for harmonizing. And so in these tricky conversations, can we remain in our God selves towards each other? And again, surrender all outcomes. Can we show up in love? Can we hear the other person? Can we hold space for them? Can we gently, with love, express our orientation? And can we also honor what our human may be experiencing in the conversation and in the topic as well? And our precious human may have fears, may have stories that they're in. And can we honor the human in these interactions, because we are human as well. So are we big enough to do all of that? Can we hold all of that? And yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And I think we are. And we are big enough to do all of that. And it's a little bit challenging at first, because what happens is we oscillate between usually our God self uh, and our sort of lower self. I'll say what ends up happening is the lower self becomes transformed through the God self, and that's when the being would be Christed, right? Um, it becomes transformed through these experiences. In fact, through the acceptance and forgiveness of these experiences is how the being ends up becoming Christed. Um, so uh, I'd like to give my experience because I sit in my God self purview of the world a lot. Um, and I'd like to express this is vulnerable for me because of my position as a spiritual teacher. It would be probably better for business for me to say that this doesn't happen to me, um, or to try to claim that I've reached a level of mastery here that is somehow something to be admired, right? But instead, what I'd like to say is that although I hold my God self perspectives probably high 80, 90% of the time, um, what ends up happening is my human lower self or my egoic mind will receive feedback from the universe and gets hurt still. It's still there. It's still energized in me. So although I'm always choosing to look through my divinity, not always, but I'm usually choosing to look through my divinity. But while I'm doing that, my human is sort of sitting idly beside, getting hurt as I do that. And so, and I'm like, yeah, I know, bud, but we accept this. We accept this. Let's go. Forgive it. Let's go. Right? That's kind of the relationship that's happening. I don't let the human drive because the human's confused. So the human self, the lower self, does not get to take the wheel. However, and the human self goes, okay, acquiesces and says, okay, okay, I'm hurting though. I'm hurting though. And then what ends up occurring though is as I witness enough things that are wounding, um, the human no longer acquiesces and then says, I'm in control now, and takes over. The human self, the lower self, has to comply, has to, with their free will, allow the God self to drive. They have to do that in order for the Christed eyes to be able to see. The human self, the lower self, has to sit aside in order for that to occur until the merging really finalizes. But as that human self is still there, that lower self is still getting perturbed by things. And then I, as divinity, am reminding my lower self, it's okay. You are loved. You can accept this. You can forgive this. We can move forward. And that's more or less the relationship. But if I'm experiencing a lot of wounds over like just boom, like a bombardment, not that other people are doing anything wrong, but I have sensitivities. And when I hear certain things, my mind makes connections and the human feels hurt. So, there's a certain place where the human then will just take over and throw a tantrum. Or what ends up happening is the human still kind of knows that it's upset and stuff, but it doesn't really know how. It's pushed away the divinity, and it's just really sad. And for me, a lot of times when I get really really sad, I tend to go to just an apathy of I don't care anymore. I'm too tired, I think, of all the sadness. I've had too much of it. And so when a lot of sadness and pain arises in the human and the human pushes away the divinity and I forget myself, I I just don't care anymore. Like I'm so I don't don't care about what I should do to fix it. I just don't care in those moments. So um, I end up saying things that are unaligned. I end up um, usually I'm not too attacking, but I can be a little defensive, sarcastic maybe, uh, um, that type of thing. I'm not like openly loving. I'm not in that moment, right? I'm not. But the problem is that I'm also experiencing conflict because I'm trying to be. Like I know that I'm sort of in my eyes, I'm in my human self's eyes. I'm also failing the moment. I'm failing the test. So I'm hard on myself for that as well. And so the only reason I'm saying this is because I think that me sharing some of that will help some people understand their own trajectory and why they can be at peace, at peace, at peace, and then boom, um, it builds up, and we're not always sort of noticing it because the wounds can be just little tiny pricks, right? And then it builds up, and it's because instead of trying to accept and forgive it, I'm literally just going, forget about it. Like, I'm not feeling into that. I'm just dismissing it as, and that's the human kind of not really, I guess sort of it's kind of like I'm focused on trying to be my God self, and the human's problems are sort of seen by my human as transient. So when I get that perturbed, that upset, it becomes a very paradoxical kind of hesitation, and don't know what to do or say. Lots of pain, lots of confusion, no idea what I'm supposed to do. Can't really see love in that moment. Um, and I think most people do something similar to this. But this is where I'm at now. And I think we are always doing this, but we just become more aware of the conversation within between the divinity and the lower self and how that engagement happens. And so I'm trying to express it as best I can to try because it is much like there's two living within. It's much like
Yes.
that, right?
I'm so glad that you shared this because this is so important. And I think in our very traumatic interactions, this is somewhat, I think, what has been going on. And so I think what we're saying is our God self accepts and honors our human self and pays attention to the human self.
Yep.
And sometimes the human self may need to express to a partner or someone else that I'm feeling wounded here. I know in my God self that all is well and this is all serving and all of that, but actually I need to really honor that I am feeling wounded right now because of what's been happening.
Yeah.
So
I just want to say,
I think if I can just finish.
Yeah, please. Sorry.
I think part of the mastery, part of the true embodiment of being our God self is still being very connected to our human self and really honoring what our human self is experiencing.
Yeah.
And not judging it,
Yeah. Yeah. I'm sorry for interrupting there. I just got excited.
It's okay.
I wanted to just highlight a piece. The divinity, divine self. She will. Mine feels like a she. It feels like a she to me, more feminine than my masculine, and I think a lot of times it's that way. So femininity might want to step into their kinghood type thing, and I sort of step into my queendom in some ways. But the divinity within it honors the expression of the human to such a degree that it will step aside, and it will. You don't want this right now. You don't want love right now. Okay, I'll just go over here. the divinity doesn't need to do anything. It doesn't need to. It doesn't need you to be aware of it. It doesn't need you to see through it. Um, it's entirely at the free will choice of how we express. Um, and it, I'd like to also share that I'm not able to tell people that I'm being wounded. It's not possible for me to do that because I'm constantly being wounded by people speaking. They're speaking wounds and they don't know it. And if I were to tell them, they would be shocked by how much of an asshole I am. Um, it would literally be a sort of constant, this hurts me, that hurt me, that hurt me, that hurt me, because people don't even realize their judgment. They don't even see it. And so because because I witnessed that and I see that judgment, I feel hurt. Because I see myself as all that is. So when they judge something, I see judgment against me. And of course that's the ego kind of personalizing things and being a little confused about stuff. And so I'm aware of that. But that is what happens. And so I'm not really able personally to talk about it because it is constant for me. Where people will just be talking. They're not even being angry or upset. They're just saying words, and they're expressing judgment, and they're not aware. And so, and I'm sure I do it too. So it's not, and I'm not trying to basically say that other people around me are bad. This is my wounds that I see, right? So I think we get to this place where I am at, where the world is both very beautiful and loving, and we can see the love, but in accepting all that is, and seeing all that is, and seeing ourselves as all that is, we then need to quickly learn how to accept that others are judging me. Whether it is me, or they're judging other things, or whatever they're judging, I need to be able to accept that others are still judging, right? As someone who is trying not to judge, I have to just accept that others are doing that. And that's the reason I'm feeling pain, right? The reason I'm feeling pain is because their judgment feels bad. It feels uncomfortable to me. And I don't think that, I have this thought that I think non-judgment is the way to go, right? So they're not acting in the way that I perceive as the way. And I need to learn how to be okay with that. And so that wounding is, we get to a place where I think it would be very challenging to deal with me as a human being if I was voicing these things. And so it's, I only say that because there are just, I think, levels to this. And everyone, and I don't know if other people will ever have the same experience that I'm having like this. Like, this is a very strange type of orientation to hold. I think it's a product of the human self thinking, the ego thinking it is God, which is a different thing, right? And I think that's what this is a product of. And so I'm just letting that, I know that idea is confused, and Sean, I think, thought he was God, right? And Sean is not God. Sean is a human, lower self. So Sean needs to chill out. He's getting a little excited, kind of claiming a little too much as him. And I'm aware of it all. But the issue is that it doesn't change the triggers. Like, the triggers come. I don't pick them. I'm not like, oh, where are the triggers? Let me find them, right? And so I just wanted to highlight that some of us, I am so sensitive that for me to tell people how sensitive I am would be so annoying and obnoxious. It would be the worst. I can't even imagine anyone putting up with talking to me if I did that. Because I would constantly just be like, I don't like that. I don't like that. I don't like that. And it might sound like I'm saying I don't like anything. That's not really how it is. It's just that there's like a piece of what is being expressed that feels judgmental, and then I'm like, oh, that's the part stings a little, and so everything stings a little, and it's kind of like I've got new skin, and so the whole world is like everything's just a little stings the flesh a little bit. It doesn't mean it's bad, and it just means that I got a little confused in my ascension and my awakening. Sean thought he was God. Sean got confused, and now what resulted in this is this type of pain. And it's okay. It's all good. It's probably so that I could speak to this exact thing to others. So I'm good with it, but there is a level that we get to, or at least for me, there's a place that I got to where I would be the most obnoxious human in the world if I was telling people when I'm triggered. I think I do need to speak up when it's becoming too much. I need to say, okay, I need to step away. But my desire to serve is so strong that I don't do that. I just let it go until I explode. So this is where I'm working on learning.
Yes. I'm really happy to hear your awareness about all of this, and just sort of working out your relationship with your human self, basically, is what it sounds like. Mm-hmm. So that it's peaceful for you and for those around you. And it's really interesting because I think, so I am also working out my relationship with my human self and my God self. And in some ways, when I sort of compare how we're working things out, it can seem a little bit like the opposite. I think that I'm really comfortable with my human's feelings, but it took me most of my life to get there. Because I was brought up not to feel anything. And so I was completely disconnected from my human and my God self for most of my life. I was just sort of a societal robot, like a Barbie doll, I would say. I was not in my God self. I was not really in my human self either. So I think where my growth is I think I'm really good at honoring my human. Although there's probably more I could do there. Because I think I still have some shame around sometimes how my human feels, or, oh, I really shouldn't feel that way. I think I still hold myself up to some ideal rather than, you know what, this is what my human is feeling. It is what it is. This is how she's feeling. I'm not going to judge it. I've been getting better at that. And then so that has been a growth point for me.
Yeah.
Is accepting my human blanket of grace towards my human, unconditional acceptance towards my human. And then I've also had growth in embodying my God self, in accepting and surrendering. And I have a very strong, focused ego. My thinking mind is fierce, which is great. It really comes in handy sometimes. But my thinking mind can really, really want to be in control, and it can be very directed. So I guess what I'm saying is I'm working on both my relationships with my human self and my God self. My human self about more acceptance, and my God self the same, about more acceptance about what's happening.
Yeah.
So I guess a theme for me here that I'm figuring out as we're talking is just a blanket of acceptance within myself about what is going on for me, and a blanket of acceptance about what is going on externally. It doesn't mean that I'll always stay in certain situations that maybe are just too traumatic or toxic or whatever, but I accept the experience and I'm grateful for the experience for what it is showing me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
The interesting thing about all this too is it's the human self that judges itself against its divinity and then gets upset with itself. Uh,
That's so true. That's a great observation. I want to just say it myself because it's a little like mind-boggling.
yeah.
The human self judges itself against its God self, its divine self,
Mm-hmm.
and then sort of beats itself up for not always being in the God self.
Yeah. Yeah. Basically, the way that it works is when we step into unity consciousness, right? We step into that field that is a vibrational level, right? It's very high. It's a high vibrational level. It's here now and available for us. When we step into it, it calls up all the stuff to the surface, all of it. And that's why when I was describing my experience earlier, it's so painful to sit there because it calls up everything. Any distortions, you need to sit in that in a purity. Otherwise, it'll be painful, like I expressed. So if you're trying to sit in unity consciousness while still having distortion, then you're going to experience turmoil as the lower self's distortions are just constantly prodded by the eyes of the Christ. So nothing is missed by the divinity within. It sees you bare, naked, with everything in front of it, right? It sees all of the shadows that you're holding. And it's you can think of it this way, it sort of says to you, you may come in here with me, but you can't bring that. And so as we stand in that frequency of unity, we will the sediment will become unsettled. It will all come up because the vibration just brings it up, and we will not be able to sit. Some people might call it, in the kingdom. The kingdom. We won't be able to be in the kingdom of heaven, which is here now, while we hold all of that distortion. So what'll end up happening is we'll oscillate, and then eventually what happens is it just becomes too much, and we just step out of our divinity, and then we feel, then we have to process and integrate all of what we just saw. And so this process is cyclical, and we'll continually do it. So as we've seen unity, we'll know that that's the goal. Once we've stepped into it once, it's self-evident that that's where to go. It's also evident that there's a way to do it where we can live as humans and see things this way. So that all, at least from my experience, and I think for all, I believe it is the evolutionary goal. I don't believe beings are here to, empower their lower self, and right, like, they've already done that, I guess is my point. Like if we're starting to ascend, they've already done all the playing and power stuff and all the manipulation and the fear. They've been in all of that already. We're letting go of all that stuff and just moving into a divine acceptance and a divine love that is hard at first. It's like getting into a bath that's too hot, right? But the longer you sit in the bath, if you sit in a very, very hot bath that feels too hot, it almost feels like it's burning you. If you just sit in it, you'll normalize to it. And even though the temperature of the bath hasn't really decreased, it won't hurt. And that's kind of what it is. We're stepping into like the light of truth, and truth is like that's why they call it the sacred fire. It burns a little, right? It's hot. It's a little hot.
Yeah.
And so, yeah.
Great points. And I just also wanted to speak to, in relationship with anyone, if there has been a difficult interaction, a difficult conversation, when you are like debriefing afterwards, to again work to embody your God self, but during the conversation to honor what your human self experienced in the interaction, and to be able to speak as the human, that this was very hard for me. I felt very wounded by this. And to seek to make repairs for the human between each other. So just, this is sort of the theme of what we're talking about in all interactions within ourselves and with others, to rise up into our God self as much as possible, while still really being connected to and honoring the human's experience in all of it without judgment.
Yeah. Yeah. I think all we can do with that is try to trust that what we feel like we should talk about or bring up out is appropriate, and that regardless, we'll learn from it.
Yes.
And try to just, we don't want to discount the human's feelings, but we also don't want to give them too much weight. Like too much weight. The feelings are more like context that helps us understand the experience a little better. And so I think when we're deciding what we want to talk about, how we want to talk about it, and how we want to speak, until people are really picking up the energy of others, which not everyone does, we have to try to be really precise with our wording. And so we want to, I think, if it's a tricky subject, I think take a moment to consider the best way to speak this thing. What is the best way for me to come at this while being able to express that this was painful for me, while not judging people or criticizing them, that type of thing. And then there's also always an opportunity to just forgive them and let it all go. And to think that there's not is not true. That's always a route. But all you can do really is trust yourself and do what feels best. And if you feel that in order for you to get to that place, that we need to speak about it, then certainly speak about it. But
and I think always waiting, just sitting on things, just processing things, just feeling your own feelings, just coming back to your center and waiting until, okay, these nuggets here do feel important to express, but waiting until you're not reactive, and waiting until it seems pretty clear, okay, these are the things that I do think would be helpful to talk about, and letting go of anything that you don't need to talk about. So yes, I like that you said trying to be very precise in your language when you are talking about these things. And we have this in our Namaste method, sticking to the facts. So even when you're expressing what your experience is, just trying to really stick to what you can really say is absolutely true. And sticking to like I statements. Yeah. I experienced this when this happened, not, you did this, or making assumptions about the other person, but just sticking to,
right,
this is what I experienced. This is what was arising for me. Maybe some of it is just my own stuff that I'm getting triggered about.
When we say you did X, right? We're telling someone else their experience. And
yes,
we don't realize we're doing that. And sometimes we are right? Like sometimes we tell them what they did and they're like, yes, I did. But other times they're like, that's not what I did. Right. And that's where that dissonance comes in. And then they're going to feel defensive. because
Yes. Yes.
they didn't do that. That, what are you
Yes.
talking about, right?
Yeah.
So
We
when,
can.
yeah, exactly. We just say, I experienced this. I felt like this. Um, you know, this is how I saw this. This is what
Yes.
came up for me when this occurred. You know,
Yes.
it's the same thing, sort of, but it's phrased in a way that's sort of recognizing that, like, this is all my stuff that's come up and I'm dealing with.
This is my experience
Right.
from the situation.
And we don't really know what they did. We don't we don't really know what they were doing or what they meant or how they're feeling. We don't
Yeah,
really know.
we
So
don't.
we
We
shouldn't
don't.
presume if we
And
can help it.
and we must, the only thing to assume is that the other person, if it's a difficult interaction and things didn't go well, that the other person was also struggling and in pain and possibly and in fear and just having a hard time. We could maybe, just assume that and grace. And I just wanted to quickly say that I kind of learned this path, and I'm not saying I always do it. I don't. I fall short sometimes with you and other people, but I learned this path through one of my experiences during my divorce custody situation, where a lot of females who I knew, who I thought were my friends, ended up writing letters against me as a mother, sort of on the side of my ex-husband. And this was very shocking, and it felt like such a huge betrayal, and was really probably one of the most painful experiences of that situation. And it took me years to get over it. It took me years to process it. It took me years to forgive. And I did eventually write a letter to each one of the women, but I wrote probably like 100 different versions of the letter. And I knew that it was going to be really important for my soul how I handled that. And the letters I ended up sending just spoke of my experience. I didn't say, you did this, you did that. It just said, during that experience of receiving those letters and having those letters read in court around the custody of my children, this is what I experienced. And I had peace from waiting. I waited and I waited and I waited and I waited. And I made sure that what I said felt like the aligned thing to say. And it also did feel important for me to express myself about that. The truth serves all. Just sharing the truth of what I experienced from that situation. So anyway, long story, but this just feels really important in relationship and can really sort of make or break the conversational experience. If you can just really rest in this was my experience, and this does feel important for me to share with you.
Yeah. Yeah. And then, just I think too, we all have different, I guess, ideas around and feelings around what we want to share, what we don't want to share. And also some of us are literally just feeling, I think, Tassel, I don't want to speak for you, but I think in your experience here, you've felt somewhat called to express uncomfortable things as your truth, as a sort of expansion, right? As a way to embody truth, right? I think, so like you seem to have what I'm trying to say is you seem to have a very soul-based kind of calling to speak your truth. Others may not have that. And so part of our job is to accept that there's a difference. For example, I'm not so inclined necessarily that way. And so it can be challenging for me, a little bit to sometimes, go through some of these discussions and things. Um, but I think that it's all well and good, and there's no the important thing is really just not judging. Like if the person feels like they need to talk about it, then all we should do is try and talk about it with them, right? Um, that's
Well,
what they want to do. So
yeah. So you're making a really great point that in any pairing, and again, it could be parent child, coworkers, husband, wife, there are going to be different life paths that these people are on. And yes, for me, it absolutely feels like my part of my incarnative path in this lifetime is to speak uncomfortable truths with others.
yep,
After I've, waited and made sure that this does seem to be important to speak, but that does feel like a calling of mine. I seem to connect with being a Blu-ray being, and that is a big part of their mission. Obviously, the Blu-ray, the throat chakra, and my throat chakra was completely closed for most of my life, which I think is part of the whole trajectory that I'm on, is opening that up and
yep,
not being afraid to speak the uncomfortable truth.
yep,
Yeah, so just being aware that we all are somewhere different on that spectrum.
yep.
Yeah, and just honoring
And
all of it.
also as way showers, with the people that are in this content, you're a way shower. So if you're even watching this and have watched this far, you're a way shower. Otherwise, you wouldn't be interested. So we are embodying divinity in different ways, and so Tassel's embodying the communicating truth, and she's modeling that for people. All the people in her life, and the people that don't resonate so much with that type of behavior are going to find it a little grating sometimes, a little difficult or challenging. Why does she always want to talk about things? Why does, right? They're going to feel a little bit like that. I don't really feel like that. I'm not trying to talk about myself in a veiled way. I am generally happy to hear everything she has to say, unless I'm feeling bad already about something. Then I can kind of feel a little bit blah. But part of what we're doing is those people will make an impact on them. Later, they'll go, she was onto something with that. I didn't see it at the time. At the time, it was a little bit of frustrating. But you've often said truth always brings
Truth
only
always
good.
serves all. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it always serves all. Offering truth is always appropriate, and transparency is where we're headed. Everyone needs to get used to the idea that there's not going to be any secret anger or secret hostility or whatever. That's not going to exist. So we have to get our comfortable with the idea of people just saying stuff that we don't really want to hear. And
Yes.
that's it. We
And
have to. And she's modeling it. So it's a huge service and a very difficult one to embody. Um, and I guess what I'm trying to say is, even though it's not my path personally to be that way. Uh, I recognize and commend the the value of that service. Like I see the value very easily. So and the reason I'm saying all of this is this is what we have to do when we're talking to our partners or other relationships, when we realize like they're not like us necessarily. They have some other thing they're serving in another way, right? They serve how they serve, and it's perfect. They're called by their own divinity to do whatever they want to do, and it's perfect. And they're serving just as you are. And trying to just remember that they don't have to serve the same way you do. They don't have to align with all of your beliefs and everything that you think and everything that you feel is appropriate for you. They're their own being on their own journey, modeling and advancing humanity in their own way. And it's perfect.
this is such, I think, a key aspect of of us embodying our God self is honoring our own unique service and our own unique gifts, even if other people find it uncomfortable, but also paying attention to their feedback and being sophisticated and aware of how can I do this better, being more masterful about it.
Yeah, tuning what you're doing. Yeah.
Yes. And then also honoring where everyone else is in their God self, and it's all unique, as you said. And I just want to say one last kind of funny thing. It's so funny. For me, one of my favorite things to do is to have uncomfortable conversations. I love it because I know in my heart how healing they are. And I know in my heart that when uncomfortable truth just gets set out on the table for everyone to experience, always a highest and best bubbles up from that. And of course, you need to be mindful about what you're sharing. I'm not saying you have to share everything, but if there are uncomfortable topics that are somewhat consistent in relationships and are not going away, to sit down and just talk very transparently and freely about them is almost always transformative. So the uncomfortable conversations are like one of my favorite things to engage in.
Yeah, it's funny because we're similar in that way. Whereas I really like to have what I consider to be friendly debate, right? Like, really, some people would say I'm argumentative. I love it. I love it so much. But again, this is just an expression of my truth, right? I love it. I see no harm in it. But because others are often identified with their belief, if I'm questioning their belief, they feel attacked, right? So I don't get to do mine as much because I like to play devil's advocate, and I like to offer the opposite polarity to something that they're saying and do that type of thing. And it's fun for me. It's entertaining. I enjoy it, but a lot of times people get hurt. So the reason I say this is because I can still do this thing, but I've seen that a lot of people don't take it so well, right? So I've had to tune that side of me. I've had to, even though I love to do this, I don't love to hurt people. So in order for me to be able to do it, I have to kind of tune it a little, modulate it, shift it a little bit.
Yes.
Because I'm trying to, usually I'm trying to show that the paradox is not real. That's what I'm usually trying to show them through my expressions. I don't care at all about what the topic is. It could be any topic. But I'm trying to show them unity through showing them the other polarity. And I don't even believe it. I don't believe the other polarity. I'm just stepping into that to mirror it for them so that they can go, oh, it's all the same thing. And I, that's why I love it. I know that that's what I'm doing. But it is challenging for people when they're like, I love the sun. And I'm like, yeah, but look at the darkness. It's beautiful. Right. They're like, no, it's not.
So I think what both of us are saying is that with our own gifts and somewhat missions that we're here to share, we can always be more masterful in how we do it. Mm-hmm. As we take in, how is this landing for other people?
Yeah.
So it's just fine tuning.
And also like that, like I really like it. So sometimes I can do that from my lower self, right? Like I can just feel like being a little bit of a brat, a little bit, like just, like, or I might feel like intellectually, I want to show my prowess, right? Like I want to show, I have got a good mind. I want to show you how good my mind is. And so the lower self can sometimes use some of these gifts, right? With the gifts still there for the lower self to use. So the lower self sometimes inspires us to bring in these divine gifts and use them in ways that are not so highest and best. They're not so high vibrational.
feed the ego.
to,
Right,
to
right.
feed the and empower the ego, right? So
Yeah. So are we in our God self with this gift that
yeah.
we're working right now? Yeah.
So why am I
So
doing this, right? But that's the question.
yes,
Why am I doing
yes.
this? And if we like get down into it, a lot of times we're doing it because the lower self has kind of
Has a desire.
has some desire we're trying to fulfill, and it's not
Yeah.
so much about the service. And
Yes.
if we can orient ourselves to trying to do stuff more for service, and then also taking time to do stuff for ourselves, but making sure the things that we're doing for ourselves aren't necessarily hurtful to others, right?
Yes.
Like I think that's kind of the best balance to get to.
Yep. Okay, so just to wrap up, perhaps.
Oh yeah, we're an hour and 20 minutes almost.
So maybe would it be resonant to end with just maybe each share like one quick practice about being in the God self that seems to work for each of us, just
Sure.
to wrap it up?
Yeah, do you want to start?
Okay. I think for me, to be in my God self, I just sort of, in a way, imagine myself like zooming out from life in a way, and my human self a bit, not disconnecting from her, but just zooming out, and just remembering and connecting with knowing that all is well, and that everything is always serving my highest and best and everyone else's highest and best. So I think it's faith, acceptance, and love for everything that is happening is how I can get there pretty quickly.
Awesome. So mine, I'll share for in the moments that you're in or moving towards conversations that are seeming to be challenging. Like usually there's a bit of a precipitation to it, right? Like you kind of tend to be aware that something challenging is coming, at least for me. But when you're stepping into that environment, basically in your mind, try to do this. And I'm not sure that you, I don't know other people's minds, obviously. But this is what I do, and hopefully it helps. But what I try to do is have a conversation with their divinity in my mind while we're having our conversation. So it takes a little bit of a, I don't know how to describe it, a little bit of a ability to do this and some practice. But essentially, I just say, my divine self says to their divine self, I see you, you are here. Right? So it reminds, I see you, you are here. It reminds the lower self that divinity is here with us, right? God is here with us. Their God self, their divinity sees me, my divinity sees them. It's reminding that we are one, right? Then I just say, I am here and I know how I serve. And we serve how we feel called to serve. The importance is not how you serve. The importance is that you know how you serve. Your divinity knows that you serve with love. So you're reminding yourself that I'm here, my divinity is here, and I know how I serve, which really is just to love and to forgive and to accept. That's really what we're here to do. We're not here to write books and to do these things. These are things we do that we enjoy. There's value to them. They're fun. But really, we are here to accept, to forgive, and to love. And that's what we're here to do. So in these conversations, we just remind ourselves, I am here. You are here. I see you. I know how I serve. I am here. And we just, so I'll often repeat, I am here. Or I'll say, I am here and now. Because not only am I here, I am this entire experience. So I am here, I am now, I accept myself for what I am. And I just try to cycle this a little bit as I'm being sort of accosted with stimuli that would suggest that there's a problem.
Yes, I love everything you said. And I'll just end with how you began this live stream by saying, am I showing up in love? If I am, I'm in my God self.
Yep. Yep.
Okay.
Perfect. Show up in love.
You show up in love.
And if you don't, then you're a failure. I'm kidding. It's like the total opposite of the message.
Yeah. Yeah. You want to give that love to yourself too. Yes. Showing up in love for yourself and everything else. All right. So thank you so, so much for joining us. And if you liked this video, if you want to give it a like, that really helps. If you want to subscribe to the channel, that also helps. And we additionally have an amazing Patreon community. There's more information in the video description. And we have an exciting course for our Patreon community this Thursday. And the topic is how to connect with your higher self, which is very similar to this whole topic that we've been talking about, your God self.
Yeah. So I think we'll talk a lot about some of this stuff, but in more detail.
Yes. So if you like this video, you may really like this course. So we'd love to have you. So thank you so much. So much love to everyone.